to be talking about sort of the basics of using Adobe Illustrator and how to lay out type and create cool, title treatments like the one you see here. And before we get started, I'll just go ahead and kind of go through the basics of Illustrator. I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and we'll start fresh. So this is basically how I always have Adobe Illustrator laid out. You'll have your toolbar over here on the on the left-hand side, and it looks very similar to Photoshop. And basically with Illustrator, you can't beat laying out type in Illustrator. Photoshop is a little bit clumsy when it comes to type layout. Illustrator, it really is the way to go in terms of laying out type, and the program makes it really easy and really streamlined. So over here we have our toolbar. Pretty much the only tools we're going to be focusing on today is the selection tool. That's the black arrow. This allows you to, grab and select things on in your workspace. There's also the direct selection tool, the white arrow. We'll talk about this more later. And then we're not going to be using this today, but the pen tool is, basically how you draw things in Photoshop in Illustrator. And everything in Illustrator, what's different about Illustrator is that it's vector based. You're no longer working with pixels. Everything is on a point system and is vector. So no pixels in an Illustrator. And over here to the to the right hand side, we have our character palette. This allows us to control, set the type, the different font, let you select your fonts, the size of the type, the kerning, leading, etc. I also have my layers palette open, and then there's the artboard palette. I'll talk about this in a second. I also have my color palette open, of course, set to CMYK as I usually do. And we have stroke, transparency. This allows you to play with the opacity of your objects. And then we have our appearance palette. We're going to be talking a lot about the appearance palette. This thing is very helpful in creating the look for your typeface. And in Adobe Illustrator, it's good to come into this. Lots of people get kind of frustrated when they first start working in Adobe Illustrator. You can't really draw per se in Adobe Illustrator. It's more, you have to approach it with a sense of that you're building something. It's kind of almost like working with cut paper, laying out type. You're not painting in here. So don't go into Adobe Illustrator thinking that you're going to necessarily paint. All right, and before I get more into Illustrator, I did use dafont.com. You might want to check out dafont.com for this project. What's nice on here is that all their fonts are free. You do have to be careful of copyrights, so you don't want to use these fonts for stuff that you will be, selling. But for class projects, there's a lot of really great fonts on here, so I suggest you guys check it out. For my little project that you see on here, I wanted kind of a brush sort of hand-done typeface, and I went up here to the section that says brush, and you'll notice they have different sections for different types of font, which is really cool. So I used the brush one, and I downloaded some cool fonts from here. So check out dafont.com. All right, back to Illustrator. So going over some of the basics. So what I did was, let's get rid of that. What I did was I went ahead and drew this image in Photoshop, and I'm essentially creating a fruit crate label for my husband's family's coconut farm in the Philippines. And I drew this in Photoshop, opened it up in Illustrator, and I made a separate layer for it. It's on layer 1. I went ahead and locked it. This is called the artboard. This is the thing that you work on when you're working in Adobe Illustrator. And you'll notice, as I mentioned before, a separate palette for the artboards. And you click on this little guy right here, and this is going to allow you to change the size of the artboard. You'll notice I changed mine to our project size up here. And this is where you change the size of your artboard. You can also add more artboards and work on multiple ones in Illustrator. So it's kind of nice about working in Illustrator. And before anything, you always want to make sure, go into File, Document Setup, and make sure your units are set to whatever you feel comfortable working in. Lots of times when I open up Adobe Illustrator, it's automatically set to points. I don't like working in points, so I set it to inches. All right. So again, I have my little sketch laid out. You'll see kind of where I wanted my title treatment to go. I want a big title up here, maybe a tagline or something right here, and then maybe a product of, whatever country right here in the corner. And since this is a fruit crate label for the Philippines, I'm kind of looking at, these are reference photos that I pulled up of a hand-done, there's a nice tradition of hand-done signs, hand-painted signs in the Philippines, and so I'm kind of wanting to copy the look of this brush-style fonts calligraphy that you're seeing here. So I've brought in some cool reference photos to look at while I work on this, and I'm going to copy this tailoring title treatment. I want to use this for my title treatment up here, the red with the white and the blue. All right, so you'll see I picked out some fonts. I just kind of laid those out right there. To get started with your type tool, you'll see it in here in the toolbar right there, the little T for type tool. You can hit T on your keyboard to access that. I need to move into I made a separate layer for my type layer, so I want to make sure that that's clicked on. And I'm going to go ahead and, when you click the type tool, it'll lay out this lorem ipsum thing just as kind of a sample. Go ahead and delete that. And I'm going to label my title for my farm is going to be called Batokai. That's the name of my husband's family's property. So we're going to call it Batokai. I'm holding down Shift and again using my black arrow tool, this little guy. You can also access the black arrow with V on the keyboard. And you just hold down Shift to enlarge it. If you don't hold down Shift, you can, warp the type in a weird way. So be careful of that if that's not what you want. Holding down Shift and just kind of placing it, figuring out how big I want it. I think that's good. So right now it's just black type, since we have black in our color palette. What's cool on Adobe Illustrator is that, you can change the color of the font by just clicking on your little sliders and you'll see it automatically changing. But for now we're going to set it to black. Okay, so I want to copy the look of this guy over here. What's cool about, let me start over. We're going to be working in the appearance palette. And this is going to allow us to, set different effects and things and apply different things to our typeface. Lots of times when people work in Adobe Illustrator, they think, oh, if I wanted that look, I would, copy and paste this font over and over again, copy, Command V, paste to the top, and, go about it, this way for like different effects. And you can do that, but the problem with that is now, say I wanted to change this type, Command T, and say I wanted to change it to cocoa nuts or something. Now I have to go in and now edit this thing. It's a big pain in the butt. So there's ways around that, and that's what's nice about using the appearance palette, and you'll see in a little bit what I mean. So let's spell it out again. And we'll start with our appearance palette. So let's bring in the red. I'm going to click on, in the appearance palette, click on this little guy in the upper right hand corner, click add new fill. You'll see it added a fill down here. I want to change the color. I don't want it to be black anymore. So with my fill little section selected, I'm going to go ahead and make that red. We are also going to add a stroke. So in Adobe Illustrator, there is the fill section in the color. There's also the stroke. The stroke means basically it's just gonna add an outline to our type. So I'm going to hit add new stroke. And you'll see this thing comes up. It's added a black stroke. We have to change, I don't want it to be black. I want it to be white and blue, as seen in the picture, in the reference photo. And you can mess around with, this is the stroke weight, this little point where it says 3 points. You can make your stroke weight really fat. This controls the stroke weight. And also you'll notice my stroke is set in front of my fill. I don't want that. I want my stroke to be behind the fill. So you can click and drag this down behind your fill. So now you can kind of see, now it's sitting behind that fill, which is what I want. So let's go ahead and set this stroke to, I want it to be white, like what I see in the picture. So I'm just gonna click on the little white box right there. Now it's set to white. I'm gonna go ahead and shrink this down. This is a little bit too chunky of a stroke. And you'll see in the photo reference that I'm working from, their little stroke on the outside of this font, it's offset. It's meant to look like, like a drop shadow or something. So I kind of want that same look. And right now, our stroke is just outlining our type. So how do we offset it? An easy way to do that is make sure, of course, in the appearance palette that your stroke is selected. Go up to Effect, Distort and Transform, and click on Transform, and then you'll see this little Transform Effect menu pop up. We're going to be using the Move tool right here, and make sure you have Preview selected. And then this allows you can see it moving around. This allows you to move that stroke around, and we want to move it slightly to the right, slightly to the left and slightly down. There we go. So already you can see, it's kind of it's similar to what we see in the photo. So I kind of like the look of that. Now you'll notice there is an additional blue stroke that I want. So again, going back to the appearance palette, we can hit Add New Stroke. And of course it's going to add another stroke. There it is right there. I want to, oops, there it is. It's this one. This is our original white stroke that we made. So this is the new stroke that I just added. I want to make it blue. Let's move it below because I want it to be behind that white stroke. And again, you'll see it's now centered. It doesn't look like the photo that I'm looking at. That blue stroke is still centered on top of the red fill, and we need to do the same thing. We need to move it over. So again, go up to the effects, go down to Distort and Transform, Transform. Also, one thing that's kind of cool that Illustrator does is that whatever last effect that you applied, it pops up here. So I could just click on that and it'll reapply the transformation. But I want to do something slightly different, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to that Transform menu. Again, playing with the Move tool. I'm going to move that, forgot to hit Preview. Move that stroke slightly to the left and down. There. So already starting to look kind of similar. Now, this font is just Helvetica, and it doesn't speak to, what I'm trying to do. I want this cool brush-looking, font. So I'm going to go up to my character palette. You'll see it's set to Helvetica. What is this one? This one is DK Brush Crush is the font I'm going to use. So I clicked on it, and there you'll see it's set. And so earlier what I was showing you is, most people, they come into Adobe Illustrator, they think in order to get an effect like this, they have to layer up their type and have multiple layers. But now what's nice is now this font that I've laid out, it's got all these in the appearance palette, it has all these different fills and strokes all saved in here, different effects applied to it. And so now, say I wanted to change my title to, coconuts, I can go ahead and do that. And that same effect is still applied. You know, I don't have to, every time I go to retype this, I don't have to, you know, keep reapplying those same effects. So let's save it back. Let's bring it back to Batokai. Also in Adobe Illustrator, you know, you'll notice I'm, you know, going back and forth and doing stuff. Most of the hotkeys are exactly the same as Photoshop, so Command Z, you know, Command V to paste. Something else that's cool in Adobe Illustrator is you can do a Command C, and then you can do a Command F, and then that pastes in place directly on top. So you'll see, you know, I have two. So Command F will place something right on top of something else. You can also hit, if you're wanting, you know, say I want to duplicate this title and, you know, try something else or something, I can just click on, you know, make sure it's selected, hit Option. You'll see my arrow changing. This will allow me to duplicate it. So, you know, you can just hold that down and duplicate it over and over and over again. Now, our type is just kind of going straight across. I want it to, you'll see in my little sketch, I kind of wanted it to hug the, you know, the sunburst thing and kind of have this curve right here. And an easy way to do that is to play with the, again, under Effects, go to Warp, and you can click on any of them. It'll, you know, it'll open up this Warp Options menu. This isn't what I want. I don't want that arc. I want to do a arc lower, and so what that is, that's going to keep the top of my letters flat straight across, and then it's going to give this little bend to the letters, which I kind of like. And you'll see, you know, make sure you have preview selected, and you know, you can go in and warp it. Some of these do get very strange. You have to be careful not to let your letters get too warped and too, you know, it'll start looking kind of wonky and maybe even a little illegible. Anyway, you can play with the warp options. There's lots of different cool effects. Flag is another one that I use a lot. But I'm gonna stick with the arc lower. And I feel like that's kind of a nice curve starting to happen. It's not exactly what I want entirely yet. You can also play with this thing and distort. You know, that's going to make my B really big. That looks kind of cool, but it's not exactly what I want to do. But for now, at least I have that arch kind of going. Let's hit OK. I'm going to go ahead and enlarge it, again holding down using the black arrow. You just grab the little corner right here, click and hold it, and then I'm going to hit Shift to maintain the proportions. I'm going to go a little bit bigger. Kind of want this Y to sit in front of that palm tree right there. I'm going to go ahead and move it over. Something you have to be careful of when you're laying out type is you always want to pay attention to your alignment and your spacing, the negative space around the type. So this is my image edge. You know, I want to make sure that this space up here matches this space approximately. You know, you don't just want to make it look like you slapped in your type last minute. You know, that looks strange with that really tight space up top and that wide space right there. So always make sure you're checking out the negative space around your type when you're designing, you know, whether it's a box or a label like this. All right. So again, this isn't exactly what I want. I want this B to look, I want it to be bigger. So I'm going to go ahead and, with your black arrow, the selection tool, you can go ahead and double click your type, and that automatically, you know, brings out the type tool. So I'm going to go ahead and select this B, and up here, back in my character palette, I'm going to go ahead and make it bigger. This is this first tab over here. This sets the font size. And if you're not sure about a tool or what the hell it does, you can go ahead and you just hover over the different things and it'll tell you what it is. Okay, so let's go bigger with that B. It's kind of fun to mess around with the font sizes. It makes things look less, you know, like you just typed it out quickly and slapped it on there. You know, we're customizing it. So let's go bigger with that B. And I kind of like that size. But now we're off. The B is way too tall. It's set too up high. I want the top of this B to be level with OTOCAY. So again, reselect that B with my type tool. And I want to mess with the baseline shift. So that's this guy right here. This is gonna move your letters up and down. So I'm gonna go hit down, and you'll notice, you'll see that B kind of coming down. And I think that looks about right. I also don't really like these little, I'm gonna zoom in, the magnifying glass is the same as Photoshop. You just hit Z on your keyboard. I don't really like my spacing. I need to mess around with the kerning on this. And lots of times you'll notice when you download a font off of, especially off the internet, you know, a free font, sometimes the kerning, the leading can be kind of strange. And, you know, the spacing between the letters will get weird. Like, I don't like that little sliver of white right there. I'd rather just have the O touching. So we're gonna mess around with the spacing between the letters, or the kerning. So again, I'm gonna select this B. I'm gonna use my double click to bring out that type tool. I'm gonna select the B, and then this guy right here, this is gonna set the kerning, or they call it the tracking. This messes with the spacing between the letters. So I can come in a little tight. You'll see that O moving over. This kind of gets used to as far as like what letter to select in order to move it. Basically, in order to fix the space between the letters on the right hand side, you have to select this. Like, I want to fix the spacing between the T and the O, so I'm going to select the T and then move, oops, wrong one. And then I'm going to, oh, there we go. And then move that guy over. Again, I don't like that weird little sliver. You always want to look out for like weird little slivers of color in your type, and get rid of those. I keep clicking the wrong one. There we go. That looks okay. I don't mind that. There's still a weird sliver of something right there, so I'm going to move my A over slightly. And, you know, just take a look at your spacing between your letters. Another weird thing I'm noticing is these sharp points. Now, that's a result of, you know, now I have this stroke around my letter. This is a hand-done type. You know, it's meant to look like it was done with like a dry brush or some kind of scumbly brush. And because now this stroke is having to, you know, wrap around this funky type, you get these weird little points sometimes in your strokes. And I want to get rid of those. And a good, easy, quick way to get rid of them is, again, we'll select our, you know, make sure our type is clicked on. It's selected now. I'm going to go back to my appearance palette. I'm going to click on, I'll start with the white stroke, and then I'm going to go up to the stroke palette, this little menu up here. This controls, you know, your stroke weight and whatnot. Right now it's set to the caps and the corners are set to, you know, the straight line is called a butt cap. It's set to, you know, it's very straight and sharp. I want to set it to round cap, and you'll see it kind of gets rid of those little sharp points. It just makes it look softer, and it's a good thing to do, especially with these crazy, you know, kind of custom type. You'll see my blue stroke still has those sharp points. I want to make sure my blue stroke is set to the round caps, and that takes care of that. So it kind of cleans it up a little bit. You get less of those like sharp ends. All right, I'm liking how this looks. This is looking kind of reminiscent to what we're seeing in the sign, the hand-done sign in our reference photo. So I'm going to leave that there for now. And of course, my painting isn't done. You know, I might want to go back in later and adjust maybe the colors. But for now, this is kind of what I want. Now we still need a tagline. I'm going to go ahead and choose a different font. I don't like how, you know, bulky that font is. I kind of want to offset it or create some contrast with maybe something more scripty. So I'm going to go ahead again, get out my type tool. Oops, sorry. Let's erase that. Let's get rid of the lorem ipsum. Let's make a tagline. I don't know. Let's just we'll do fresh coconuts. It's still set to that original, type that I had earlier for my title treatment, but we're gonna go ahead and change it to, let's do this one. To deselect something quickly on your keyboard, you hit Command-Shift-A in Adobe Illustrator. So if you have a whole bunch of things selected, you can just click outside the box and get rid of them, or hit Command-Shift-A. Let's put this, I kind of want this to be nestled between, this top part of the coconut and the palm tree. I'm also making sure I kind of have an even amount of space between the tippy top of that straw and the top of, between the letters and the title treatment. So making sure it has kind of a nice place to live nestled in here. We'll go ahead and, maybe we can use that blue from the earlier font. This is the last color that I use, so, it's nice on Adobe Illustrator, it kind of saves that color. So you can click it and click and drag and put it into your fill color right here in the color palette. That's a little bit hard to read on this blue background. We'll go ahead and, just so we can see it, we'll make it darker for the sake of the demo. But another good thing to do is, if you get done with this, when you finish your painting, whether it's, done traditionally or in Photoshop, you can grab and select, you could bring in your image into Adobe Illustrator and use there's an eyedropper tool just like in Photoshop. There it is right there. It's the same quick key. You can hit hit I on the keyboard, and you can pick up colors from your image. So say I wanted to pick up a color from these palm trees. I can click on my type, hit Command with it still selected, hit I on the keyboard, and then that's going to pull up my little eyedropper, and I can, I don't know why there it goes. And you can grab colors from your image. So there it copied I don't know why it switched the font, but it copied the colors from, I think I accidentally clicked on the top font. It grabbed the colors from the image, there we go. So that's kind of fun to do, especially after you get done with your illustration. We'll leave it like that for now. So fresh coconuts can go there. I also want to do a product of, so we'll go ahead and start a new, let's do product of let's do another line of type because this is going to get too long. I'll go ahead and hit return or enter. And let's shrink this down, again holding shift, and we can put that there. Again, being careful of my spacing, I'm paying attention to this space and this space right here. There we go. Definitely not the typeface I want. Most of the times when you see a product of treatment or, line in a line of type that says product of, lots of times it is that sort of, industrial, just standard institutionalized font, like a sans serif font. Let's try Arial. Let's do, what should we do? Perhaps one of the Arials. No. We could just stick with, let's do Helvetica. And then you'll notice underneath your, when you select a type, you can click on the font style, and it'll give you all these, for certain typefaces, particularly Helvetica, there's a lot of different, styles of the font. So, I'm looking for something light and condensed. Let's just go with this one. You'll notice I screwed up with my P right there, product of the Philippines. A quick way to change the case of your fonts, you can go up to type up here and then go to change case, and you can change it to all uppercase You'll see the little P changed right there. You could also change it to, there's also, you know, I could change it to all lowercase. I could do title case where it capitalizes the first letter of every word. We're going to go ahead and just change it to all uppercase because that's usually what those look like. And that can go there. Probably I will set this to, you know, after I get done with my illustration, you know, I'd have this green grass right here. I'd probably want to set it to white and just have that white in front of the grass. And I'd rather go with white because I already have white present in this guy up here. So I think white would be a wise choice eventually if I were to finish this illustration. So that's kind of a nice, you know, basic way to lay out type. There are different, you know, you can go into the effects palette and really play with all the different effects. For example, you can, you know, keep going, you know, explore. I don't even know what half of these do. I rarely use, you know, many of these, but you could go into, say, stylize with my font selected. If you want to, you could do a drop shadow, outer glow. I'll show you drop shadow right now. You have to be careful with drop shadows. They can get pretty cheesy looking pretty fast, but you can kind of make them work. You'll notice there's lots of, I clicked on preview so I could see it. You'll see it added this strange green drop shadow. You can play with different settings as far as the overlay, set it to multiply, normal. Usually, I think the default setting is to set it to multiply. You can play with the opacity. Right now it's turned up to 100%. You can also, similar to what we were talking about before, you can play with the placement of the drop shadow. So you can, you know, X offset, that's going to play with the, you know, where it goes horizontally. The Y offset, of course, moves it up and down. So you can kind of play around with that. You can also play with the blur. You could have no, that really blurs it out to where you can't see it. Or you can have no blur and just have a sharp edge. And then, of course, you can play with the color. Let's see what, yeah. So there's black. So drop shadow is kind of fun to play with, but be careful with how you use it. It can get a little cheesy. We'll hit cancel. Kind of liking where this is going. Again, to figure out my colors, I will have to finish the illustration. But for now, you know, it's kind of just a nice quick way to lay out type and you know, apply different effects. You know, again, it's a good idea to have out some sort of photo reference that you're looking at, especially if you're unfamiliar with type and you know how to use type or lay it out. It is good to have some nice photo references, especially for the colors and, you know, different treatments and effects and whatnot. Let's move that over a little bit. One thing I did forget to mention is another nice thing to have out in terms of laying out type is this align palette down here. This is a quick way to line up typeface. So say I did want my, you know, fresh coconuts to line up with the Y right there. What I could do is select both of them. I'm gonna hold down Shift to also select the title treatment up here. And now with both of them selected, I can move them around. You want to make sure this is set to align to selection. Oftentimes when you open it up, it's set to align to artboard. So I'll show you both ways. So align to selection, that's going to move that guy over to be aligned with that Y. Or I could set it to center, and now it's kind of centered then. You can also do, you know, kind of play around with each one, you know, what each one of these does. It's pretty self-descriptive in what you see in the little icon right here. It's going to tell you what it does. These are really cool to play with, you know, especially to get things lined up perfectly. So again, I'm going to go back to that one. So nice way to line up things. Or for example, say I wanted to, when you're laying out type, you really want to pay attention to how things line up with one another. So like this product of the Philippines, you know, maybe I want my batokai to line up with that. So again, selecting that. And that's going to line it up with that. It cleans things up for you. It makes things look more professional. It makes it look like you didn't just kind of slap it all together last minute. I kind of want to add a curve to this coconut. It's kind of bugging me. Let's click on this thing. Let's go to arc. You can do something like that. Have it follow the curve of that bottom part. That looks kind of cool. A little bit less, you know, just kind of thrown in there. All right. And that is it. So again, just some basic tips to lay out font in Adobe Illustrator. I hope this was helpful. You know, if I was going to now go ahead and say paint this traditionally, I could just print this out and trace it onto my illustration board. Or if you're working in Photoshop and you kind of want to see how this looks in your illustration, in your painting that you're painting digitally, you can just select it, you know, go through, select these, hit Shift, select them all. You can also do you can also hit Command A to select all, and that's going to grab all of them. And I can just copy and paste these into Photoshop. When you go into Photoshop, it will ask you, do you want to paste these as a smart object or a pixel layer? You can go ahead and just hit pixel layer, but know that in Photoshop now you can't edit these. You know, so if you are working with type, you will want to have a separate file in Adobe Illustrator to edit your type, and then, you know, be able to copy and paste it into Photoshop. You can't now edit it in Photoshop if you copy and paste it in there. Again, that's it. I hope that was helpful, and good luck laying out type, and I really suggest, you know, giving Adobe Illustrator a try. I think you will be happy with the results. All right, thank you.